which is frustrating if you just want the facts about the man. But that's the point. There are no simple facts about Jesus. Now, what marked the three waves of scholarship about him was the modern belief, informed by historical research that was going on in all fields, that you could kind of peel away all the different layers of tradition and get back inside the culture of that day and begin to determine what he did say and what he didn't say. And if you remember back a few years ago when the Jesus Seminar, which included Borg and Crossan and a whole bunch of other scholars, when they would get together, part of what they would do is they had these colored beads. And they would take a vote. Did Jesus say this or not? And the different colors would represent different likelihood that he actually said this and he didn't. And they had the actual sayings of Jesus down to a very small number in the scholarly world. Well, that effort has kind of died off and gone quiet. And that doesn't mean that it wasn't important or helpful. For instance, one of the things that's one of the most obvious things that's come out of all the scholarship that's been done over the last couple of centuries is we can firmly say today that Jesus was a Jew. And that just seems so obvious. And yet, in the history of Christianity, that obvious fact was pretty much ignored or denied. But all of the scholarship has situated Jesus within his own time and his own place and come to the firm conclusion that, yes, he was just like everybody else around him in Galilee. He was a Jew. And there's no controversy about that anymore. And so it's helpful. But in recent years, it's been interesting to me reading all these different scholars and now some more. There's been a backing away from the notion that we really can know with certainty what Jesus said and did. And the focus in the recent efforts of scholarship has shifted to early Christian origins and communities, as well as the other communities that remember Jesus, like Gnostic ones, and what they remembered about him. And then there's been a huge focus on how does memory actually work. And this is the big, in social sciences and history and related fields, the role of memory has now come to the fore. And how do we remember? Why do we remember the things we remember? And then tell what we tell about events. And that has had a big impact on recent Jesus scholarship. And this has had some significant effect on the scholars and how they read scriptures. I mean, the Jesus Seminar scholars, there was a time when they were kind of cutting and pasting. Kind of like good old Thomas Jefferson did, and cutting out lots of things and trying to leave us with just the facts. But now, they're looking at scriptures in a different way and asking the question, what's being remembered in this story? And to give you an example of what I mean, I want to read for you one of the accounts from the Gospels of the temptation story of Jesus. This is from Luke. Luke 4. Jesus, full of the Holy Spirit, returned from the Jordan and was led by the Spirit in the wilderness, where for 40 days he was tempted by the devil. He ate nothing at all during those days, and when they were over, he was famished. The devil said to him, "If you are the Son of God, command this stone to become a loaf of bread." And Jesus answered him, "It is written, one does not live by bread alone." Then the devil led him up and showed him in an instant all the kingdoms of the world, and the devil said to him, "To you I will give their glory and all this authority, for it has been given over to me, and I give it to anyone I please. If you will worship me, it will be yours." And Jesus answered him, "It is written, worship the Lord your God and serve only him." And then the devil took Jesus to Jerusalem and placed him on the pinnacle of the temple saying to him, "If you are the Son of God, throw yourself down from here. For it is written, He will command His angels concerning you to protect you. And on their hands they will bear you up, so that you will not dash your foot against the stone." And Jesus answered him, "It is also said, do not put the Lord your God to the test." When the devil had finished every test, he departed from him until an opportune time. Now, there's not a mainstream biblical scholar who thinks that this is a verifiable, in our modern sense, happening. There wasn't any camera rolling when it recorded Jesus going out into the wilderness by himself. Read any scholar in the mainstream and you will read that this is a legend about Jesus. A legend that situates him in his Jewish heritage. As Moses and the Jews were tested for 40 years in the wilderness, so Jesus was tested for 40 days in the wilderness. And this passage pulls themes and passages from the Exodus account and from the Psalms and builds it into a legend about Jesus. And so if you were cutting and pasting from the Bible, you would perhaps toss this passage out because it probably didn't happen in history. But if you're focusing on the memories of what the communities were remembering about Jesus, then you read this passage and you ask, what does this passage tell us about how Jesus was remembered? And Allison uses this passage as an example, and he says, "This legend is steeped in memories of Jesus. Was Jesus not remembered as a miracle worker, as our story presupposes? Did he not refuse to give authenticating signs just as he does here? Did he not think of himself as leading a victorious battle against the forces of darkness, for which Matthew 4 and Luke 4, the two temptation stories, stand as fitting illustration? Did he not have great faith in God, a fact that the dialogue between Jesus and the devil presupposes and expounds? The temptation narrative may not be history as it really happened, yet it is full of memory. My judgment is that taken as a whole, its artistic originator has managed to leave us with a pretty fair impression of Jesus, even if the episode does not contain one word that Jesus spoke or narrate one thing that he did. Memory and legend are not easily disentangled. So when we try to weed out the fictions, will we not be uprooting much else besides? Jesus was a real person and a real memory. And he became a living tradition that encouraged some construals and discouraged others. And so, for example, if someone were to write a story of Jesus that depicted him as a warrior going into battle, or as a political leader, as Muhammad is remembered and depicted, there's virtually no one in the Christian community or outside the Christian community who is a scholar of Jesus who would give it any credence. Because that kind of a memory doesn't cohere in any way with the living tradition of memories about him. And so that's where, that's kind of where the scholarship is right now. Focusing on early Christian origins and what they remembered about Jesus. And then what are the common themes that come out of there? We may not be able to say that this is what Jesus said with 100% certainty. This is what Jesus did with 100% certainty. But we can certainly come to some agreement on the themes that defined his life and then also define the memories going forward. So over the next couple of weeks, I'm going to be sharing examples from some of that recent scholarship of how the work is going and what it tells us about Jesus. Next week is Mother's Day, and I'm going to be talking about Jesus and his mom. Mary. And how Mary is remembered, and how their relationship was remembered and is remembered, and how much it has changed as time has gone on. So thank you for listening.